Well, again, everyone, the third tier, the third rung on Maslow's hierarchy of needs is labeled as social needs. And before we get started, I want to cover a truism that is kind of really important to understand. Humans are wired for social interaction. They're not wired for isolation, and even though some folks, you talk about classic introverts and, even folks that would consider themselves kind of a recluse, they still have needs for social connectivity unless there's something really, really clinically wrong with them. Now, the other cascading truism there is that, a lot of folks find that social connection and social connectivity in other segments of their life. So that when they come to work, those social needs are not quite as prevalent as they are with other folks. Now, if you'll consider for a moment the converse of that, let's assume that someone doesn't have a lot of social connection and interaction in their other segment in their private life outside of work. Or even take one more jump. What if the social interactions that they have outside of work are pretty grossly unhealthy? They have a lot of dysfunction in those relationships. There's a lot of disconnect in those interactions. So plain and simply, the only healthy interactions they have come from a working environment. So when we talk about social needs, it's not something that becomes optional. For a lot of folks, it becomes an absolute necessity. And even for those that's optional, it still becomes a very, very strong motivating factor for why they want to come to work and why they want to stay coming to work. The organizations that know that and recognize that and understand that tend to have extremely engaged workforces and really, really healthy working atmospheres. Now, before we talk about strategies, and the strategies are going to be pretty straightforward and obvious on this one, I want to talk about something that plain and simply doesn't work. The forced interaction, the forced social interaction of the old monthly potluck model just doesn't work. And in fact, you end up getting a lot of pushback. There's a lot of disconnect, a lot of disconcert about that particular strategy. So if you're that employer that says, yep, we have social interactions once a month, we have a potluck, we turn it into an awards dinner or an awards lunch, and we hit on all those things, I got to tell you, you're not meeting social needs. The strategy that we'd like you to consider thinking about is first of all, creating an environment in the working place, in the working environment, that encourages impromptu, relaxed, and casual social interactions. So is it okay that a couple of team members stand around a cubicle or an office and chit-chat for a couple of minutes? If your answer to that is yes, then you're achieving that social need. If, by converse, you're that leader or manager that walks by and, shoos people away and reminds people to get to work or reminds them that you're here to work and not to socialize, then you're not meeting that need. A lot of organizations have achieved that simply by their office design, have created a more social atmosphere by wider halls, lower walls, things like that help that interaction level out. You need to take a look at not only your design, but also your approach. Are you encouraging those impromptu social interactions? And as a leader, are you modeling those impromptu social interactions? The other strategy I'd like you to think about related to social needs is, are you creating opportunities outside of work for your people to connect? And I know this sounds a little bit on the cheesy side, but things like bowling leagues and softball teams and reading clubs and all those kinds of sponsored, organized, without a lot of money, but sponsored and organized by the company activities create a huge, huge ability for people to impact their social needs. We've seen cases where people would love to quit the organization, but plain and simply they wouldn't quit their softball team. And it's those kinds of pieces of connectivity that end up to be really extremely valuable in meeting social needs of your team members. Next time we're together, we're going to touch on a difficult subject, and we're going to go kind of off typical with it when we talk about ego needs, which is the second to the highest need in Maslow's hierarchy. Until next time, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again.